So, I mean, that leads very well into the next question. And in a sense that, how have the projects that you and Jet have been involved in, how is it influencing and impacting learners sort of through to higher education?
It's a hard question, and I don't think we've really answered it, actually. You can really only change institutions in a climate that is conducive to change. And the climate in the civil service now is not. It's dominated by patronage, nepotism, corruption. You can't have a world-class system under those conditions. So, again, back to how do you change individual lives? How do you impact on the long-term future of things? Well, we've got to train our teachers better in the first place. We've got to educate them far better than we're doing. And if we succeed in that, and I think we are moving towards that, for the last 13 years now, I've been working in initial teacher education, and we are making progress. There's no doubt about it. But going beyond that, once it's going to be a long-term process, As teachers go, there are 400,000 teachers in the country. It's going to be a while before we get a critical mass of better educated teachers that begin to impact on the system. But even then, again, there's this caveat. If we don't change the way the civil service is governed, those effects are going to have a ceiling. They can't impact into a world-class school system unless you change both of those things. Educate your teachers much better, change the way in which they are managed and deployed.
So what you're saying is there's room for still another 30 years of your working.
We haven't really started yet. Once we start, it's 30 years. Yes. That's how you change systems. And, I wonder why all the young people around me are so impatient. Because some of my colleagues say to me, why are you working in initial teacher education? It will take so long to change things. Well, 30 years down the line, we haven't changed anything. In fact, we've gone backwards. So you have to have a long view, I think.
I would say that in terms of initial teacher education, policy has shifted, and in a sense that brings me to the next question. What policy changes and priorities have shifted your research focus, or has your research informed where you think policy should go?
It's a hard question, actually.
Yeah, I guess, from where I'm sitting, before 94, there was no initial teacher education policy that I'm aware of. So the first one was in 2000. We then have, the minimum requirements for teacher education qualifications that come out in 2011, revisions in 2015. So, and we know that there's another revision planned, although it's taking some time, but the Primted standards are meant to feed into them. So, would you say that was research guiding policy, or, the other way around?
There's been a very interesting interactive relationship between regulation, policy, and practice.
Okay.
And JET has been central to that. In 2010, the Council on Higher Education, which is the regulatory body for all higher education qualifications, you can't offer a degree if you don't have the approval of the CHE. In 2010, the CHE published a report which evaluated all education programs in the universities, and they found that only half of them were adequate. And a quarter of them were non-accreditable, and the rest were sort of put under watch. And that caused a huge uproar in the initial teacher education sector. And so government began to put out policy documents. The Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development came out in 2011, published jointly by the by the DBE and DHET, the Department of Higher Education and Training. And the first edition of Mr. Tech, the minimum requirements for teacher education qualifications, was published. And JET launched its initial teacher education research project, which took the findings of the CHE evaluation and said, what's going on here? Let's dig into this. So we took 5 universities and we examined the ITE programs for intermediate phase teachers in detail. And I was shocked. You know, some of the universities were allocating like 5% of a B.Ed to teaching kids languages, and English in particular, and English is supposed to be the medium of instruction from grade 4. Very little time was given to maths teaching. You know, even though most teachers, when they go, you can't guarantee what subject the principal's going to give you to teach. And so the findings of ITERP, the JET Initial Teacher Education Research Project, made quite a splash at the time. And the next iteration of Mr. Tech, the one that came out in 2015, explicitly quoted the ITERP findings, saying these are the areas in which teacher education is failing. And Mr. Tech 2015 was a significant advance on the one that was published in 2011, in that it said all primary school teachers must be able to teach languages and mathematics. For the first time, government policy mentioned subjects specifically as to what should be taught and what graduating teachers should know and be able to do. So, and that symbiotic relationship between research policy and practice has continued. So PrimTED, the Primary Teacher Education Project, came out and established these standards. And the standards are now influencing what universities are doing with their curricula. So SIRP, the Sesotho and isiZulu Reading Project, which is my big baby at the moment, is developing a reading course for B.Ed teachers for how to teach reading. So there's been this really interesting interaction between the regulator, the Council on Higher Education, the policy maker, the Department of Higher Education and Training, and practitioners in the field, including JET. So NGOs and the universities are the practitioners. And there's this give and take.